The United States has been occupied by a hostile force. They tell us our history is wrong. They tell us our history is evil. They tell us that the majority of the population are evil oppressors who must bow down. I mean, if you were to tell me the story of the culture war as it is now, but explain it as some historical event that happened in some faraway land, I'd assume that an invasive force broke through the barriers and the gates of the country, stormed in, and then subjugated its people. What we see right now in the U.S., the NFL, they're going to be playing the Black National Anthem before the Star-Spangled Banner during tentpole 2021 season games, and players will feature the names of police brutality victims on their helmets. What we are seeing is the systematic erasure of traditional American culture, but faster than we've seen before. Now, progress or change, these things happen over a long period of time. The things that we once did in America in the early 1900s are offensive and we don't do that now. That is the evolution of an American culture. I think we've done a pretty good job. What we're seeing now is more akin to a culture being replaced overnight. Why are we going to be playing two different national anthems at sporting events? Well, these events may very well get woke, go broke. The attempts to erase and change culture dramatically and rapidly may not actually work. You need to do it slowly over a few generations. Typically what we see in history is one invading force comes in, takes over, occupies a city, and then says you can't speak this language, you can't practice these things. And over time it gets erased, but it still takes a generation. Now that requires physical force. When you don't have physical force, the government does to a certain degree, and Antifa and BLM have been rioting, the less physical force you can exert, the longer it will take. So naturally a culture can change and it can progress and everyone's kind of cool with it. But the problem now is we're getting this rapid and dramatic change, and it is, in my opinion, a chaotic and destructive force that won't actually help people flourish and survive, and it won't lead us towards a future where we can travel the stars. I'd love to be more like the Federation in Star Trek, but it appears like we're going to be more like the Borg, I guess. Now, with this story from the NFL, I don't think it's the biggest deal in the world that they're going to be singing a different song or whatever. I do think it's bad. I think having a different national anthem played at the exact same time is indicative of two different countries, which suggests, we're in some kind of civil war, isn't it? And as long as this culture keeps growing and crushing the traditional American culture, and eventually one will be destroyed, and we know which one that is. The traditional American culture. Now, as for me, I'm a bit of a reformist. I don't think that simply because it was America and apple pie and all that stuff means that we should just keep doing it. I'm not a big fan of baseball. Never been a big fan. America's pastime. I don't know. That's not me. A lot of people really like baseball and they don't want to see it go, but people sometimes change their tastes. Apple pie, ton of sugar. As American as apple pie. Yeah, I like apple pie, but I try to avoid it because it's bad for you for the most part. You see, the point I'm trying to make is there can be reasonable change. The problem is they're not going after something like eating sugary treats or playing a sport. They're going after our founding documents, our Constitution, the evolution of this country that has expanded civil rights for everybody. And they are pushing segregation, division, and racial animosity. How will they go about doing it? Things like this. And I think this will ultimately lead to more division. But the collapse isn't just this one story, which we'll get to. This is a bit of a cornucopia of culture war chaos that I bring to you in this segment. The next story we have is the new emoji set that's coming in, which includes pregnant men. Pregnant men. Yeah. This is a change that is happening in society. We saw a change with gay marriage, for instance. They have emojis where it's like two men who are holding hands with a heart over their head. And these things, they're real. It's emoji that represents something legitimate. But the pregnant man phenomenon is substantially less in occurrence than even gay marriage. So ultimately, I don't really care too much about emojis. If you want to have a pregnant man emoji, I'm kind of like, sure, whatever. But you need to understand the grains of sand making a heap and where this ultimately leads to. What I can say is, right now, considering Republicans are basically inept and incapable of governance, we may just end up with, well, I think it's fair to say that the left will win. But it does look like we're heading towards balkanization because the internet is preventing people from just being cut off. Back in the day, as I mentioned, with the occupation, you could come out and say no one's allowed to speak these things and they have to do it in secret and hiding. We may get to that point. I mean, censorship is getting really bad for anybody who's anti-establishment, but there's still ways to communicate through technology and mesh networks. So what does that mean? I did the math, and it was a lot of math. The other day, I did a segment talking about how over 35% of people in the United States want it to balkanize, meaning they want their region to break away from the greater U.S. and form 5 distinct regional unions instead of one United States. The number is actually 37.2, which is about 2 points higher than I thought it was. See, what I did was I took the regions, I took the percentage of people in favor of secession, then I averaged it out. That doesn't work because the Pacific region is half the size population-wise of the southern region. So when I accounted for population, when I calculated based on population, the actual number is 37.2% of Americans, according to this poll, want to secede from the Union. Or, I'm sorry, I should say break apart from the Union and formed balkanized regions. I think we will be heading in that direction. Not because they made a pregnant man emoji. That's going to be all over the world, I guess. It's each of these things as a grain of sand making a heap. There's a lot of people who are going to see this who are conservative who say, no way, I'm not all about that. There's a lot of leftists who are going to say it's absolutely fine. You will then start seeing a continued fracturing of culture where if you can't erase the culture outright, then it persists. And if there's no will for a fight or ability to conquer places with force, then you just get balkanization. The point being, southern states tend to be more Republican, tend to be red. So there's some changes happening there, but still mostly red. And of the 107 million people estimated to live in the southern region, according to this poll, it's about 44 million, I think. So it's like 47 million because it's 44%. They want to secede. That's a lot of people. There's a lot of people who are saying no to these things. Well, I should say 66% of Republicans are saying they want to secede. 66% of Republicans in the southern region. Let me show you a few other things. We've got this story. Drag classes for minors sells out in Scotland. Okay, well, we're not Scotland, all right? Still, what we're seeing with this stuff is international. There are similarities to what's happening in the UK because of the internet. There are parent cultures that are forming, and I wonder if ultimately what you see with wokeness in the UK, in Europe, across Europe and the United States, and in several other countries, but mostly in the West, will this be the unifying culture that creates a massive North Atlantic union of some sort? I mean, we've got NATO, we've got the UN essentially, but the UN doesn't function as well as people would imagine it would. But could it be that in order to create a union between Europe and North America, you need wokeness, the prevailing culture that's spreading, and it needs to adhere to the lowest common denominator? I'm not so sure that's the case necessarily, just an idea. What I really think happening is that when you see like drag classes for minors, you are seeing extreme granularization of culture in that there is a very, very tiny minority of people who will find themselves knowing someone or being a pregnant man. But we then add those emojis, the pregnant man emojis. So you can see that they're trying to pander to every possible culture and subculture. And I kind of get it. There's money to be made if you can sell something to somebody and you can hyper target. This has a lot to do with technology. Let me show you a couple more things, right? I don't know, it's kind of all over the place, but the bigger picture here is the granularization and the collapse. Families sue Universal Orlando after actor made white power okay gesture posing with girls. He didn't. It's not true. It was someone playing Gru from Despicable Me, and he made the okay hand sign down, pointed down, which is the circle game where if you look at it, you get to punch him. Well, the family said it was racist, and here's more news. It's not just about this. It's about the news outlet themselves blurring the image.
Out of Miami.
Look at this. They blurred the image. Let me see if I can show you the. There you go. They actually show the Anti-Defamation League's website, and they blur the image. When the news reporters were trying to tell people what this was, they said the OK hand sign is offensive. My friends, it is all falling apart. Now, something may rise in its stead, but here's what I think. Balkanization is extremely likely. And let's go back to the first story so I can, this is the best example. Balkanization is extremely likely, in my opinion, because cultures won't simply cease to exist. Conservatives won't be like, I just will change my way of life overnight. No, they're going to move to areas where there's more like-minded people. So what are we seeing? We're seeing with California, people moving to Texas. People like Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan's fairly lefty, but he's not down with what's happening in California. You're seeing in a bunch of other, stupid bug. You're seeing in a bunch of other places, people moving to places like West Virginia and Texas and Florida. So the people in the United States who don't agree with what the Democrats are doing are moving to red states, and the people in red states are moving to blue states. In West Virginia, we read a story about a teacher complaining about what was happening in West Virginia and saying, I need to move to a blue area because people here are crazy. You see, the balkanization is happening. Now take a look at the national level. The NFL announced that they're going to play the Black National Anthem before the Star-Spangled Banner. It's almost as if it's an international game. You know, you'll have Russia versus Spain, and they'll play both anthems or something like that. Not in America. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to be pissed off about this. I wonder if they'll want to watch. The song is called Lift Every Voice and Sing. Every. I guess it's not every, so they put an apostrophe. You know what I've never been a fan of? Like in Stargate, they do this. They just use apostrophes to like make words. Just say it's every. Lift every voice and sing. Oh, sure, whatever. It's known as the Black National Anthem at the start of each game during week 1. The anthem will be performed before the Star-Spangled Banner. A source confirmed the controversial change to ESPN on Thursday. Who wants that? Who wants that? Who watches football sit there saying, I demand the Black National Anthem? Nobody. Nobody is. Ideologue cult members have infiltrated institutions, and they are implementing things that are suppressing and pushing against American culture. In Evanston, Illinois, they shut down the 4th of July parade, and they had a Pride and Juneteenth parade or event or whatever. There you go. Over a long enough period of time, the things you enjoy, the people you know will cease to exist. But this is happening too rapidly. You can't just have 2 national anthems, and based on race, no less. There are a lot of people who are going to say no. Now, you can make these changes generationally, but this is much too fast. And maybe it's because of the internet. Maybe nobody has control. It's not intentional. It's just happening this way. Well, I believe the end result is going to be people are going to say, I will no longer watch the NFL. If you are someone who believes in the United States, its mission, freedom, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights, you should be appalled by this. I'll tell you my fear. I'm not, as much as the SPLC would like to say, I'm a reactionary opposing the revolution. I'm actually fairly revolutionary, but more reformist, actually. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of problems in this country. The Ron Paul Revolution, they called it. I would have loved to have seen Ron Paul as the president. I'd love to see the Federal Reserve be abolished. I'd love to see a dramatic change to the foreign policy of the United States and an end to this interventionism that we do, where we go and regime change wars and nation building, sending democracy overseas. I don't care for any of that. Hey, but that would be revolutionary. So I don't think we do it by throwing bricks. I think we do it through peaceful, persuasive, and resourceful means. So I want to see some very serious changes in this country. Changes for the better. The problem? I'm not a cultist. I'm not one of these lunatics, and you probably aren't either. I don't care for their weird racial animosity. I'd love to have a country with no Federal Reserve and no foreign interventionism and probably lower taxes to a certain degree, because I don't want that money spent on war, but I'm actually fine with taxes. It's just the problem is there's no accountability for how the system works and where that money goes. But you know what? You get rid of the Federal Reserve and things are very, very different. But I'd love to have that country where I can have my friends of every different race and sexuality and identity, and they can smoke weed and trade in Bitcoin. Very, very libertarian future. But this is why I call myself fairly like moderate, centrist, libertarian type. You know, I used to say liberal, but I think the problem with the word is that it's tainted. No, I do believe there needs to be some functioning government, a very weak federal government and state sovereignty. But I'll tell you this, because I'm not a cultist, because you aren't, they'll call you far right, which is the weirdest thing ever. They call Glenn Greenwald alt-right. What does that even mean? Well, now Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks is calling him alt-left. What happens when I say I'm actually in favor of paid parental leave and universal health care, like basic level supplemented by private insurance? They still say far right. Why? Because we will not bend the knee to their racial identitarianism. So in the end, what do I see? Donald Trump, man. Donald Trump did a whole lot, and he had a lot of votes. He won fairly narrowly in 2016. It was like 77,000 votes. He lost, I believe, in 2020 by, I think, around 41,000 votes. So what that means is in the key states that, Trump needed, he needed 41,000 or something like that. Now, of course, at the popular level, it was like 9 million. No. I'm sorry. It was like 6 or 7 million. But the popular vote isn't how the president is chosen. What I see now is you've got the Mises Caucus, the Libertarian Party. That's actually promising. Joe Jorgensen, sorry, seems like a nice person. Never going to go anywhere near that. That's not for me, especially when she got on board with the cult and tweeted that it's not enough to not be racist. We must be actively anti-racist. I'm like, get that cult stuff away from me, dude. What are we seeing? I could have used any one of these stories as a headline. But I look at these stories. We've got the NFL Lift Every Voice and Sing. We've got the pregnant man emojis. We've got drag classes for minors, families suing over the okay hand gesture. And I just see all these stories at once. And I'm like, bro, it's Friday. This is so much. And it really all just is a sign of one thing. Let me ask, who on the left agrees with all of this? I mean, I guess there are some people, but I don't think so. Often the left and the right will complain that each side is lumping them all in together. And it's like, that's happening. Tim Pool must be far right. It's like, no, I'm just not in your dumb cult. And I believe in freedom, individual responsibility. Because of that, I'm in the greater opposing faction, the culture war right, even though economically and culturally, I lean left. Then you have the culture war left, which is really far left. And they're a bunch of people who believe a bunch of random things as well. There's a great amount of overlap, but therein lies the big issue. I know people who are Democrats, and when I mention the drag class, like, I don't support that. I'll be like, well, all of your thought leaders do. And therein lies the big issue. On the left, there's overwhelming support for all of this stuff. On the right, there isn't. That's why I think the right is not going to win this. But it seems like balkanization is the most likely result. What do we hear most from people when they talk about all the problems? Peaceful divorce. They're saying we need a peaceful divorce to avoid a civil war. Well, what's a peaceful divorce? There's no north and south. Left and right is not defined by where you live necessarily. In the Pacific region, it's like 47% of Democrats want to secede from the Union. That's a pretty substantial number, and 39% overall between independents, Republicans, and Democrats. There are people who just want to break apart. So when I look at the idea of peaceful divorce, when I see the federal government's desperate and waning in power, and when I see the NFL completely unable to have any kind of social cohesion, well, I realize something. The issue isn't that at the NFL. They're trying to inject a new culture to erase the existing American culture, our culture. It's that they don't know how to make money anymore because half of the demographic is left. To put it simply, 20, 30 years ago, there was a handful of TV channels. You put something on the TV and people will watch it. Now, you couldn't capture, you could capture, 40 million people on a TV show or 20 million on a TV show because most people would just turn it on. It was all they had to watch. Now that everything has become much more granular and people can choose specifically what to read or watch, now they're trying desperately to figure out how to create a lowest common denominator that will attract everyone and instead attracts no one. And then, to put it mildly, it's not that people are saying they want balkanization or the U.S. to collapse. It's just that it is actually happening because there's a big cultural split. To put it much more simply, go to timcast.com and become a member. We have a new website, I believe, should be up Monday. That's our target, but things could change because of bugs and bug reports and things like that. But there's going to be a lot of work happening on the site over the weekend where we should be launched on Monday. And I'll tell you, the news articles that we have up at timcast.com are very culture war-y. They talk about very specific things you probably see on these channels. However, we're going to be doing a bunch of other shows. And I was talking with the team and I was talking with the devs about our paranormal mystery podcast, our Cast Castle vlog, Chicken City. And something that came up was that's going to be a very weird front page. People are going to go there and they're going to see an article about Biden, an article about Bigfoot, an article about the chickens. And as we expand in sports, your front page is going to be very, very strange. So you're going to need an editorial decision about what you're representing and what people get when they come to your site. So again, to simplify what that means, people go to Vox.com specifically to get this uppity, well-to-do New York progressive perspective. They go to the Gateway Pundit to get the populist right-wing anti-establishment narrative. You don't go to one place to get all of those things. So that means the people who only watch my channel have a worldview that is extremely granular, extremely specific. The people who watch my channel and some other channels have a more mixed worldview. But in the end, everybody is huddling around one or two people they trust or outlets they trust, in which case their worldview is becoming very different from everyone else's. In the long run, there won't be one truth in this country. Right now, we have two overarching truths, essentially, between the different culture war factions. But with Lift Every Voice and Sing and the American and the American national anthem, those are the parent anthems. What happens then when other people say, "What about our anthem? What about the Chinese people who are forced to build the railroads? What about their anthem? What are we going to do? Is a football game in America going to be the Olympics, where we have to show every flag and every anthem?" But that's where we're going, because what the NFL is trying to do, they realized with this granularization, they're losing audience. So this is the point. If I only do culture war stuff for timcast.com, we will attract the culture war audience. But what if we want to be something bigger than that? We want to build culture in general. Then we start making other bits of culture. Well, now you might actually lose a portion of each side and gain a portion of each side. There's no guarantee that you'll actually gain more audience because you're diluting the content. The culture war people will come to the site and say, "I don't want to read about this paranormal stuff," which we've already had comments saying that. People are like, "This article's dumb. I don't want to read about Quantico covering up, murders or whatever. I want to read about Joe Biden. I want pictures of Spider-Man." Well, what happens when we only have 1 in 10 articles? It's pictures of Spider-Man. JJ is going to get mad and not want to read anymore. So I'll put it this way. Take a look at the Hydraulic Press YouTube channel. What do? They put objects in a hydraulic press. That's it, for the most part. And people love watching it. But when they start mixing things in, then people watch less and less and less. I'll give you another example. There's a big problem with news YouTube channels 10 years ago and still to this day. The issue is that if somebody has a channel where they're like, "I do backflips," they turn on the YouTube channel, the guy does a backflip. The next day, a video comes up, the guy does a backflip. People who love backflips will watch every single one of those videos like, "This is awesome, this is awesome." Then one day, he uploads a front flip, and they go, "Front flip? I don't care about front flip," and they ignore it. The signal is sent to YouTube, this viewer no longer watches every video. The algorithm not really understanding why they chose not to watch that specific thing. So when you have a YouTube channel, a news outlet, a website, or a culture that can attract people based on one specific idea, they'll come to it. If you dilute it with something else, you'll lose it. So when you look at news YouTube channels, what would happen? They would say, "Donald Trump does backflip." Everybody clicks it because they want to hear about Donald Trump and backflip. Then the next article is Hillary Clinton does front flip. And those same people say, "I don't like Hillary, I don't like front flip," and they ignore it. The channel, the news website, is hoping that they'll attract the other side. In the end, you end up losing both. So what does that mean? What am I trying to say? Once you get all of this psychosis in media with the rainbow butt monkey, I can't say the full thing, and you get the NFL playing two anthems, you're not going to make both sides happy. You're going to make both sides angry. And both sides are going to say, "We don't want to watch." To be fair, though, the Black National Anthem BLM people don't watch football to begin with, so they're basically just nuking themselves. But they were scared. They were losing money. So there you go. Anyway, long story short, weird stuff happening. I think it's kind of falling apart. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.